U.S. President Trump announced that a 30% tariff on EU goods will take effect on August 1st, 2025. This move has sparked widespread concern and reaction in the EU. The tariffs are believed to potentially disrupt supply chains across the Atlantic, harming businesses, consumers, and patients on both sides. EU Commission President von der Leyen responded quickly, stating she seeks negotiations to reach an agreement before August 1st. However, the EU has also prepared countermeasures, planning to impose taxes on tech giants like Google and Meta. As a US-trained infiltrator in the EU, von der Leyen's response appears weak, and most predict Europe will quickly capitulate to the US. In contrast, her stance toward China is extremely tough. In her July 8, 2025, European Parliament speech, she harshly criticized China's trade policies and its stance on Russia, accusing China of supporting Russia's wartime economy and stating this will determine future China-EU relations. Such remarks are seen as a major confrontation, casting a shadow over the upcoming China-EU summit and undermining dialogue with China. Europe's industry is currently experiencing a clear decline, with Germany, the economic powerhouse, facing particularly severe issues. Germany is von der Leyen's homeland, but she seems unconcerned with its interests. If China-EU talks collapse, or if the EU betrays China in negotiations with the US to secure a separate deal, China will retaliate without hesitation, halting rare earth supplies and imposing tariffs on European goods. China has long been fed up with von der Leyen's double standards, believing she must submit to the US but act aggressively toward China. Von der Leyen and her family once lived in California with her husband for an extended period, and she speaks fluent English. As a German, she insists on using English in EU communications, even though the UK has left the EU. Many in EU institutions still use English as the primary working language, not for the UK, but so their US masters can understand debates without translation. The US tactic of using infiltrators to undermine Europe is an old, familiar strategy. Nokia, once a leading European tech company, held over half the global mobile phone market and was a top telecom equipment provider with significant influence in both business-to-business and consumer markets, making the US envious. Stephen Alop, a former Microsoft executive, became Nokia's CEO. We won't delve into the detailed business history, but the outcome is clear. In 2010, when Alop took over, Nokia held about 50% of the mobile phone market. Alop claimed Nokia needed reform, while US media relentlessly criticized the company, working together internally and externally. By 2013, after Alop's reforms, Nokia's global market share dropped to 3.3%. Its stock value fell 85%, and it was acquired by Microsoft at a low price. Nokia, once dominant in the global mobile phone market, vanished, with American companies like Apple and Qualcomm controlling the mobile ecosystem. Finland's former national pillar collapsed rapidly, and its chances of regaining such a significant role in global tech are slim. In 1999, the euro was introduced, and it officially entered circulation in 2002. In 2004, many Eastern European countries joined the EU. At that time, the EU's GDP surpassed that of the US, and the euro was relatively strong, showing potential to rival the dollar. Russia was also actively integrating with Europe. If the EU had cooperated closely with resource-rich and militarily powerful Russia, exchanging strengths, Europe could have soon challenged the US and achieved independence. However, the US easily manipulated Baltic states and Poland, using these clown countries to provoke Russia and sabotage Europe-Russia relations. The US also instigated a color revolution in Ukraine, plunging Russia and Ukraine into long-term conflict. Additionally, the US sparked the Arab Spring in the Middle East, causing a flood of refugees into Europe. Under the combined pressures of war risks, worsening Russia relations, and refugee inflows, Europe completely lost to the US. By 2015, the EU was thoroughly defeated in its economic war with the US. Its GDP overtaken, and the euro, battered, lost its former ability to compete with the dollar. In 2016, having just subdued Europe, the US swiftly turned to strangle China. After 2 years of preparation, Trump launched a full-scale trade and tech war against China in 2018, catching China off guard. However, Trump underestimated China's strength compared to Europe. His initial confidence turned to frustration, and due to setbacks in the trade war and the pandemic, he was ousted from the White House by Biden. Logically, after returning to power and launching a tariff war against Europe and other nations, this was Europe's historic opportunity to retaliate against the US and regain independence. Yet, the US infiltrator von der Leyen, despite the US continuously striking the EU, adopts a submissive policy toward the US while constantly provoking China. Honestly, I admire the US's eye for choosing such a loyal infiltrator. Germany, von der Leyen's homeland, will be the biggest victim of this farce. Germany had the chance, alongside France, to lead Europe in building an independent European army, replacing NATO and making the EU a true global power rivaling the US and China. However, under the influence of numerous US infiltrators, German companies have gradually lost their dominance in the Chinese market, and the auto industry is in jeopardy. Under Trump's leadership, the US not only pursues hegemony but also disregards basic diplomatic courtesy. Trump treats traditional allies like Canada and Europe with arrogance, frequently using vulgar language to humiliate them. Yet, Europe, once the political center of the world, lacks a true leader to stand up and assert its independence. Watching as von der Leyen, the infiltrator, pushes Europe toward the abyss. This is truly regrettable. Perhaps after being a dog for too long, one loses their wolf-like spirit. But being a guard dog is no easy task, as the US master offers no food, only wielding a stick to intimidate and discipline Europe. Meanwhile, outsiders like China and Russia also hold big sticks, ready to strike if Europe barks recklessly.